and all of the good times and experiences and love that we had for JAIME. And very much JAIME continues and stays with us in his spirit and his personality. We're going to have a number of different opportunities for people to speak about JAIME. What we're first going to do is we're going to continue with the burial, and as difficult and as painful as this is, we ourselves begin to shovel and cover and begin covering ourselves. To highlight the difficulty, we start the first 3 shovels with the back of the shovel, and then we'll continue for everyone who wants to participate to continue shoveling. When that's finished, we're gonna pause and we're gonna speak and give the eulogies for JAIME, and then we'll close the service. I'm Ari Berman. I'm Anita's husband, who is the niece of JAIME, Louis' daughter. This is my son Yonatan.
I'm my great uncle, grandfather's brother.
Nate Green, Jaime is my uncle.
Jaime is my brother-in-law.
And your name is?
Adela Ash. I am an Ash.
Hi, I'm Elena Rothfeld. My mom, Frida, was Jaime's first cousin.
Risa Rosenthal, Elena's sister, and my mom was Jaime's first cousin.
Clara Fliegelman, he was my first cousin.
Laura Kostinsky, I'm the sister of Jaime's wife.
Barbara Ash, wife.
Michael Green, father of Nate Green, here.
Elias German, first cousin to Michael Green, an old friend of
Brother.
Jamie from the 50s.
This is Vivi.
Ellie Eisner, I'm Evie's husband. Jaime was my uncle.
Troy Eisner, Ellie's father.
Brian Ash, Jaime is my uncle.
I would like to say for the past 2 years, I had the most beautiful, wonderful relationship with Jaime. We used to talk almost every Sunday. I look forward to his talks and everything. The love that I developed, of course I had love for him, but the love that I developed for him was very high, and I wish he should rest in peace, and that his wife Barbara and the rest of the family accept whatever God has decided, and God bless his memory. Thank you.
Amen.
So I'm here in a state of disbelief that my uncle Jaime, a person who embodied such energy and zest for life, such a powerful, strong will, an independent mind and spirit, a person filled with ideas and strong, passionate opinions, a planner, a doer, and an achiever. How could it be that such a strong spirit has left us? Jaime was a fixture in my life, beginning especially in my teenage years, as a child and teenager, and later as an adult with intellectual interests and prone to philosophical speculation. Jaime was someone I could talk to about all issues and have long, lively discussions and even debates. Jaime had a masterful, wide-ranging intellect and insatiable curiosity about the world. He had a brilliant scientific mind, and he came up with numerous patents in electronics for the companies he worked for. My mother and my uncle Luis both had an aptitude for science and math, but both of them looked up to Jaime as the genius of the family.
He was.
Jaime himself looked up to his mother's brother, Tio Jacobo, who was known to be a great intellect and as a role model. Jaime was a great humanist. He was knowledgeable and could speak with authority about world history, music, art, food, culture, literature, science, and nature. He had an insatiable curiosity for knowledge and culture and had an adventurous streak. With his beloved wife, Barbara, they traveled the world far and wide. In my youth, we always looked forward to receiving a detailed postcard from Jaime and Barbara from some exotic locale. I'll mention as well that Jaime, though English was not his first language, everything was beautiful, precise, punctuated properly, exact. He was truly a master of all his languages, including English. And so we always looked forward to receiving his detailed postcards from some exotic locale. He always remembered our birthdays as well, I might add, and he would send us all cards and a gift. Jaime was connected with my father's side of the family. He tinkered with and repaired electronics with my cousin Elias Gorman in Cuba, who later immigrated to the US and lived in my father's house when my father was a teenager, and helped my father gain proficiency in Spanish. My father was a stamp dealer as a teenager, and he was in communication with Jaime during this period. It was to their mutual surprise and delight when my father called to speak to my mother for the first time 10 years later that Jaime Ash answered the phone. They spoke for an hour until he finally spoke with my mother, and the rest was history. By the way, this is true because my mother always said that my father spoke with her like close to midnight. So.
Yeah, she said you were calling. She said you're calling very late.
Because he spoke first with Jaime. Jaime told me he left Cuba in 1957 to study engineering in the US. 10 years later, he moved out on his own to California. He met his beloved wife, Barbara, there at a synagogue. He worked for many years at Hewlett-Packard. He talked about how he respected the ethos and social consciousness of HP, which made working there especially meaningful to him, and later complained how the culture changed during his later years there. Jaime was someone with high-minded ideals and values and sought to live by them. HP gave Jaime and Barbara the ability to take long vacations and travel the world in compensation for their great work. Jaime filed a number of patents during his time at HP and before at other places. I still remember Jaime took me to visit HP at least twice, and I was amazed. In one visit, he was designing antennas for medical devices, and I saw piles of books on antenna design and little antenna pieces littered around. Personally, as a child, as I mentioned before, with intellectual interests, Jaime was someone I could talk to about all issues and have long, lively discussions and even debates. I knew that Jaime respected me and my intelligence, and his telling me so meant a lot to me as a child and a teenager, and gave me a psychological boost. As my interests veered strongly towards Jewish life and Orthodox observance in my late teens, some of our conversations could occasionally get a little strained, as he would challenge me and occasionally even debate me on these things. Ultimately, however, there was great love and respect between us. Jaime was a strongly identified Jew, proud of his Jewishness, a strong supporter of Israel. I remember when my cousin Anita and Ari and I were in Israel in 1992 and 3, and Jaime and Barbara came for a visit and took us around. I got my first taste of Netanya, Caesarea, and kosher Pizza Hut, thanks to Jaime and Barbara. I had a wonderful visit with him in 1988 when my brother and I came to California to visit for the summer. Jaime came and stayed with us in Queens in October 1998, and even went to shul with me and my father during Sukkot. I built a sukkah that year, and we all ate there. I was very proud to introduce him to my good friend and mentor from Queens College, Dr. Iskowitz. I will say that my parents and I were very proud of him. His intellect and accomplishments reflected positively on us as a family, and gave me another role model for aspects I could aspire to. I visited again in 2006. In the summer of 2011, Jaime gave me a lot of support during a family crisis in which my brother was living with me, and during the long, difficult period afterwards when I was laboring to find social support and services for my brother. I had another wonderful visit with Jaime and Barbara in the winter of 2015. Jaime and Barbara were always wonderful hosts. Jaime would plan a full day of activities and did his best to accommodate my kosher observance. We twice spent the day at the the Computer History Museum in Palo Alto, the campus of Stanford University, walking about San Jose, seeing art exhibits. We went several times to one of the only kosher restaurants in the area, Jerusalem Grill. It was one of his favorite restaurants, and it became mine as well. We even walked the campus of Google together. I am still to this day amused by the fact that we were once walking the streets of Palo Alto at 10 p.m. and there was no car in sight. A pedestrian crosswalk said, "Do not walk," and I, being a New Yorker, completely ignored it. A block and a half later, I realized that Jaime and Barbara were not with me. They were smiling at me, still waiting at the crosswalk for the light to change. Not sure, but in December, I told Jaime in a long phone conversation about how I sold my apartment in response to current events and my plans to move to Israel with my father this year. He understood me and told me that I have seichel. That was his term. You have seichel. He also told me about his best friend, Marcos Fried, who was doing just that and was very excited about me one day meeting him. He was also excited about my being a multinational, as Jaime himself was multinational. Here is from an email Jaime sent me in December. "I hope this works for you, but let me and/or Marcos know if you need any other help to facilitate your plans, even though I will be sad for the fact that by the time you accomplish your goals, we will be living much further apart. The same goes for me and Marcos, by the way, but life marches on and each person must do what is best for them. And thinking about that, I realize that I did the same thing in 1957 when I left my parents in Cuba and immigrated to the USA. And once again, I repeated that in 1967 when I left them in New York to come to live in California. It seems that history has a way of repeating itself over and over again, since much earlier in 1926, my father left Poland to come to Cuba. And then again in 1960, he left Cuba with my mother and my sister, your mother Mirta Zal, to immigrate to New York. My love to you and your father, Uncle Jaime. Sadly, he was too prescient. By the time we will accomplish our goal, Be'ezrat Hashem, we would be living much further apart. Jaime, you were a great uncle to us. I admired you, I was proud of you, and I was honored that you were proud of me. We saw each other way too infrequently, but each time we did, it was a festive celebration for me and for my parents. My brother misses you and feels the same way. I will miss you very much, Uncle Jaime, and I hope I will live a life that makes you proud of your nephew.
Louis, or Luisito, as Jaime would call him, cannot be here to say goodbye to his beloved brother. But I will be his voice. Aside from my wife, children, and grandchildren, Jaime was one of the people that I felt the closest to. I loved him dearly. When we talked or when we emailed, we addressed each other as hermanissimo, a superlative for the word hermano, which is brother, a word that I think Jaime made up. I don't think that exists. But the meaning is really way more than a good brother. To me, He was a mentor, an advisor, my go-to person, a best friend. He was intelligent, skillful, sort of a walking encyclopedia. And I was very lucky to have learned a lot from him. Even though we had different personalities, he was my role model in many ways. Following in his footsteps, I first taught radio and TV repairs. And then I became an engineer like he did. We shared the love for classical music like our father did. And probably because of him, I developed an interest in nature, animals, astronomy, technology, stamp collecting, and so many other things. One of our most recent projects was scanning and saving all family pictures to the computer. And in the very Jaime way, no detail was left untouched. Jaime could spend hours researching and talking about anything and everything. I know that my illness affected him greatly and was a source of great anxiety for him. But that is the kind of brother that he was. Jaime had a great love for our parents, his siblings, his cousins Clara, Frida, Marcia, and Paula, and their families, his nieces and nephews, and of course, Barbarita, as he called you to us. He often referred to Barbara as the love of his life. Thank you, Barbara, for 50 years of loving him. Before bedtime, our mother used to say, Buenas noches, a gute Nacht. Hermanísimo, buenas noches, a gute Nacht. Rest in peace. You will always be in our hearts. I would like to thank my son Brian for all that you have done. You have been terrific, and Daddy and I are very proud of you. I also want to thank you, Ari, because you are always there whenever we need you. And you know that this year we have needed you a lot. So both of you be healthy, be happy, and the best.
I'm speaking on behalf of a few people. First, on behalf of our Aunt Barbara. These are her recollections of Jaime. It all started when we met at synagogue 53 years ago, introduced by a mutual friend. On our first date, Jaime took me to a restaurant. However, he neglected to tell me that we were going to dinner, so I had eaten dinner before he came. That began our pattern of miscommunications throughout the years. Nevertheless, those years have been incredibly wonderful years. We were married for 50 years and it went by blazingly fast. We loved each other deeply, and as Jaime used to say, we always had each other's back. Jaime was an intellectual with an encyclopedic memory. He had a multitude of interests: history, astronomy, politics, animals, nature, computers, and all technologies. So many things. And of course, travel. Jaime made my life fun and interesting. We traveled to many places together. He made friends quickly, and we often had lively conversations and adventures because of that. His facility with languages was frequently an enabler to those friendships. Jaime was a part of me, and now that part of me is gone. He was the love of my life, my basheret, and I miss him terribly. Oh. He cared so much about family, people, and the world. Thank you all for your sympathy and support. Next, I'm going to just read a few words from Jaime's colleague, Marcos Fried, who he worked with for many years at Hewlett-Packard. So from Marcos Fried. I was fortunate to meet Jaime a few months after starting my full-time job at Hewlett-Packard in 1987 when he joined my group. I immediately noticed a few books in Spanish on his bookcase. Within a few minutes, we had bonded. We had too many things in common. Jaime quickly became my mentor and helped me navigate the technical and political aspects of working in a research and development lab at one of the most prestigious companies at the time. No matter what he was doing, he would stop and listen to my questions. At that point, he would supply a long, thoroughly detailed answer that described every angle, possibility, and outcome. With Jaime, no detail was too trivial or unimportant. He applied this principle to his professional and personal life, to the great benefit of all of us blessed to have known him. Jaime and I met regularly for lunch for the better part of 34 years. Our conversations ranged from Silicon Valley to work issues, then travel, history, languages, Yiddishkeit, you name it. Most of the time I had to excuse myself and return to the office. We could have talked for hours on end. I will miss those many hours we spent together, but I am thankful for each one of them. May Jaime's neshama be a blessing to everyone who knew him, and may Hashem grant his family comfort and strength to move forward and keep his memory alive. This is from, okay, this is from me. Sorry, guys. Okay. My first childhood impression of my Uncle Jaime was his beard. At once fluffy and a bit wiry, a luxuriously hairy salt and pepper face, several years before it eventually settled into its all-white form. As a little boy, all I wanted to do was touch it and make nice to it and pull on it and then do all those three things some more. My uncle indulged me. He figured me out pretty quickly, and it got to a place where I didn't need to ask. He would just offer me his beard as soon as I approached, and I appreciated that. It was a joyous and endlessly fascinating experience, at least for me. My second childhood impression of my Uncle Jaime was his distinct Cuban accent, impossibly more pronounced and even more Cuban sounding than my own father's, whose Cuban accent is pretty darn impressive in its own right. And Jaime's voice, wrapped in that Cuban accent with the most rollingest of R's in the land, would quote Spanish poetry and sing fragments of exotic songs and offer lots and lots of opinions on everything and anything, even on things I had no idea one could have an opinion on. In case you were not aware, Uncle Jaime had opinions. My third childhood impression of my Uncle Jaime was his seeming life of adventure that he and my Aunt Barbara lived. Tio Jaime and Tia Barbara were globe-trotting sophisticates who ate all sorts of foods I had never heard of and seemed to be always on their way to or on their way back from another city, another country, another continent. Also, they didn't own a TV. That part was pretty weird. But the rest of it sounded absolutely incredible and captured my imagination in so many ways. One of the great joys of extended family are the wonderful comparisons and contrasts they invite. Our uncles, aunts, cousins, and people who share common origins with us, yet have their own thing going on. They extend our reach into aspects of life that are outside our everyday experiences, allowing us to stake a bit more claim to parts of this great big world that we might not otherwise have the opportunity to touch. For me, my Uncle Jaime provided many such opportunities. Speaking of opportunities, allow me to free associate in classic Jaime fashion, I happily had the opportunity to spend a few days with Jaime during what would be the final weeks of his life. Struggling with an inability to eat, difficulty with mobility, and waves of confusion, Jaime still continued to be interested in new experiences and new interactions and was still fascinated by the world around him. A few things stand out for me, meaningful memories that I will always cherish. My uncle was not a terribly religious man for most of his life, but he had developed a strong God consciousness during his last year. Rabbi Yisrael Hecht of the local Chabad of Sunnyvale in the Bay Area, a reliable visitor and advocate for my aunt and uncle, offered Jaime the opportunity to put on tefillin, the ritual boxes and straps containing religious writings worn on the head and arm during prayer. To my knowledge, it was the first time he ever laid tefillin. Jaime seemed very connected to his Judaism, his ancestry, and to his family while performing, wearing them, and reciting the Shema. Non-religious myself, I don't often participate in that ritual, but Jaime's enthusiasm, the gravity of the moment, and the opportunity for a meaningful shared experience inspired me to come along for the ride. And nobody can say it didn't happen because we have the pictures to prove that it did. Another memory that stands out is when we were helping Jaime find the motivation to eat. We looked for games to play to help him, and found ourselves leaning on an association he had surrounding the number 3. That number was so meaningful to him while we were chiming, Jaime's preferred term for shooting the breeze. Instead of getting him to take 1 bite or 1 sip, we encouraged him to take 3. He connected that number at first to Alexander Dumas's The Three Musketeers, calling Barbara, Laura, and myself his musketeers. Of course, Jaime declared himself D'Artagnan, the fourth musketeer, the leader. As we counted off his sips and bites in every language we could think of, tres in Spanish, shalosh in Hebrew, dry in Yiddish, san in Japanese, etc., 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 Jaime started connecting that magic number to his beloved family, the three siblings, his beloved sister Mirta, my father Luis, and himself, and the three siblings in my family, my sisters Evie and Anita and myself. There goes that wonderful comparison and contrast extended family invites once again. A third memory from the trip, and my favorite of all, occurred on the last day before I left. Jaime, who had not been out very much since COVID, woke up inspired to take in all the local Santa Clara front lawn gardens had to offer. The home gardens in Jaime and Barbara's neighborhood were bustling with every kind of flower you could imagine now that spring was fully in bloom. So we got him in his wheelchair, wrapped him in a cozy blanket, slipped on his COVID mask, and off we went for nearly 2 hours. I could really see him perk up dramatically, at first with incredible appreciation for the feeling of fresh air and the variety of colors and shapes that nature and good gardening had provided us. He was in fact so inspired that he felt compelled to take charge, recruiting me to execute his plan to photograph all of the flowers. As to be expected, my uncle had a lot of opinions on how to do it correctly, and I indulged him to the best of my ability. He actually said, "I am the director, and you are my cameraman." And I said, "Okay, let's do this, Mr. Director." And we had a really special day. It was so sunny and cool outside and peaceful, walking the various winding cul-de-sac streets of Santa Clara, chiming and appreciating some of the simplest but best pleasures that life has to offer. I'm really happy that I got to have that experience with him. I want to take a moment to acknowledge my aunt, my uncle's widow, Barbara. She has been through a lot this past year, and even more these past few months and weeks. With the help of her wonderful sister, brother, niece, and other family, friends, and neighbors and caregivers, she did all that she could for Jaime, including hiring full-time help, consulting an endless myriad of doctors, and even undergoing construction to their home to accommodate Jaime's ever-evolving and increasingly challenging needs. The fact that we're having the service here, committing Jaime to the sacred ground that he will forever share with beloved family members, is due to Barbara's sensitivity and thoughtfulness and what she felt Jaime would have wanted. I think she chose well, and I and our whole family are grateful to her for it. Yes. We have all endured a tumultuous and challenging year during which our sense of normalcy has been disrupted beyond recognition. Putting the pieces back together and finding a new normal is going to take time, and it's going to take work, and not every day is going to be easy, but some days ahead will be great. I'm confident of that. As we move forward, my hope and my prayer is that we find the strength and the space to take it easy on ourselves and on each other, healing from our losses, while carrying with us the curiosity, energy, and joie de vivre that my Uncle Jaime manifested and embodied during his best days. Tia Jaime, I will wear this beard proudly on your behalf, and I will continue to try to be a clown, that's French for clown in case Jaime never told you, in the best possible ways, bringing smiles to the people I care about, and look forward to exploring the world in new and unexpected ways. Now rest easy, we will always love you, and we will miss you.
Song of David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me beside tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me religious paths for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days. V'chtam leDavid, shomreni el ki chasisi bach, amart l'Adonai Adonai atat v'asi b'alalecha, l'kdoshim asher ba'aretz hema v'adrei kol chafsei bam. Yebu atzvosam acher ma'aru, ba'al asich nizkehem midam, u'ba'al asad shmosam al sfosai, Adonai menasech alki v'chosi atatomich goreli. Chavlim nafali b'animim af nachla shafra alai, avarechaz Adonai asher yatzani af leilos yisruni kol yasai. Shavisi Adonai l'negdi tamid ki mimini ba'alamod, l'chein samach levi v'yel kvodi af b'sari yishkon levetach. Ki lo tazov nafshi l'shol lo titein chasidcha l'rosh shachas, adieni arachayim, sovas machotas penecha neimos b'mincha netach. Amen. Amen. Yesh me Rabba Marach Ram Omel Maya. Amen. Okay, we're now closing the service. I want to thank everyone for being here. A lot of people made very significant efforts to come here, really surrounding Jaime with his family and dear friends. I want to thank my brother-in-law Eli, his father Tovio, who came here to join us to be with us at this time. Joel Simon from Riverside Chapel has been enormously helpful, a good friend of mine, really from the very beginning of this. Thank you so much, Joel. And especially my dear brother-in-law Brian, who's really just, as you heard from his words, just the spirit and meaning of his life in essence comes out in his actions. And that truly is reflective of how you've tended with such care and love at this time. And our greatest, our most heartfelt feelings of deep love to Barbara, and so much, when we think of Jaime, we think of Barbara, and the way that you and he lived your lives together, enjoyed your lives together, and just spread so much joy. It's truly a blessing to all of us who know you and who knew him, and of course Jaime's dear brother, Louis, represented so beautifully by my Bubby's words. Before on your way, what we're going to do is form two lines parallel one another. Barbara, stay back with me. We're going to form two parallel lines. Barbara's going to walk between those lines. So one on one side. Joel, if you could set it up, you could set it up over there. And as Barbara walks, you could say in English or Hebrew, wishing her comfort. In Hebrew, it's Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'toch Sha'ar V'Leitzion B'Yerushalayim. In English, just say, may God comfort you during this during this time of loss. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'toch Sha'ar V'Leitzion B'Yerushalayim.